Now, without any further delay, come to tonight's session on how to tell your story to potential employers. Let me give an introduction to our acclaimed and admired speaker of tonight, Ms. Connie Kwan. Connie is a management executive from Silicon Valley with 16 years of product leadership experience spanning blockchain, digital health, energy, hard tech, and software. She's an entrepreneur, advisor, and an active speaker on the topic of product storytelling. She has given talks at Product Management Festival in Zurich, Google Tech Talk, Health 2.0, and Atlassian Summit. Additionally, she has been on panels for women in product and product pub and was interviewed for a podcast for Practical Product. She has founded 2 startups and helped many founders craft and deliver their product visions. Connie is a master at engaging different audiences through different and powerful narrative. A very warm welcome to you, Connie. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today. I wanted to let you know that I'm using a broadcast tool that incorporates my slides and my live presenting like a news anchor would. So I'm actually going to stop my video here and then switch to that, which is through my screen share. So that's what it would look like. But I'm excited to share this with you. So here we go.
Imagine this. You've landed that perfect interview at the perfect company. You're about to walk into the VP of Product's office, and she's going to ask you, why do you want to join this company? And of course, you have the perfect answer. This is the exact opportunity that you're looking for. This is a great company to work for, and the product really resonates with you. Guess what? Everyone else is going to say that too. So how do you stand out in the sea of candidates when it comes to interviewing? That's what we're here to explore today in this session called How to Tell Your Story to Your Potential Employer. I'd like to share this quote. The candidates who tell stories are the ones that every company wants. We look for people who describe their experiences as some kind of narrative. It's a tip-off that they know how to engage and connect the dots and have an instinct for how the world works at a deeper level. Did you know that storytelling can reveal so much about you? And did you know that it's so difficult to tell a good story? Because what's required in storytelling is for you to recognize all the different pieces, cherry pick the pieces that are important to tell, and tell those pieces in a captivating way so that you can be remembered. That is actually a very difficult skill and one that every employer is looking for, especially in the product role. So how do you stand out amongst the sea of candidates? I see my role in product leadership as a storyteller. Over the years, I've told thousands of stories in order to launch products, in order to get investors on board, get executives excited about the vision, and the team rallying behind a vision. I'd like to tell you a story about my life. My grandfather was a fortune teller. You see, he was blind. So his family gave him a skill that allowed him to make a living. And fortune telling did not require that he have vision. So fortune telling it was. And as part of his role, he gave names to babies. He would foretell the fortune of these newborns and award them a name that would help them ward off bad luck and bring good fortune to their families. Unsurprisingly, he gave me my Chinese name too. And if you don't know about Chinese names, most of them require quite a bit of writing, usually around 30 pen strokes per Chinese name. My Chinese name was so special that it required 60 pen strokes. That's right. I was so frustrated with my grandfather for giving me a name that took me half an hour to write before every single test that I wrote as a child. It was really frustrating, but it wasn't until later that I realized the significance of my name. You see, my family moved from Hong Kong to Canada. My whole family, grandparents, uncles, aunts, everyone. We moved from Hong Kong to Canada when I was 11 years old. A lot of people moved out of Hong Kong at that time due to some political unrest. And my Chinese name is actually comprised of two characters. The first one is Man, which means flexible or agile. And the second one is Feng, which means maple. It is a very unusual character to use, the character maple, in a name. And maybe 0.001% of Chinese people will have this character in their name. So it's very unusual, and it's definitely unusual for a girl's name. But somehow, my grandfather, through the magic that he is as a fortune teller, foretold that I would move to the land of maples, Canada, at some point in my life, and therefore gave me this name that is just so appropriate. Maple also represented strength in the face of change. And there is nothing more appropriate than that for someone who is about to move halfway across the world and start a new life with her family. Now, the reason I told you this story is to help you remember my name in Chinese, yes, but also to illustrate a point that had I not told you this story, you're very unlikely to remember a random fact about my Chinese name, that it means flexible maple. If I had simply gone in and told you that I moved from Hong Kong to Canada and later to the US and that my Chinese name was flexible maple, you would have forgotten both of those facts, probably instantly, as soon as you walk out of this conference hall. But the fact that I weave it into story means that 60% of you are more likely now to remember my Chinese name. That's the power of stories. Because when we use stories, we engage the brain in a very different way. Not only are your language processing centers engaged when I tell a story, your senses are also engaged. Your visual cortex, your sound sensory, your smell sensory are all engaged. And this engagement of your full brain helps you remember what it is that I have communicated with you. And that's why you need to get good at telling stories in order to be more compelling and to be remembered. What are hiring managers looking for? By the time you get into an interview, they saw your resume and they, at a certain level, believe that you have the experience and are able to do the job. So the face-to-face is really to assess some of the other aspects of your capability. They want to know that you are someone they can trust to get the job done. And they also want someone interesting to work with because they're going to spend a lot of time with you. So how do you make sure you get these elements across in your interview? There are 5 questions that you must ask yourself first and be ready to answer when you walk into the interview. These are the questions. The first one is, what is my middle name? What makes me special? Middle name, sometimes in American culture, people would give someone a middle name nickname to characterize who they are. So for example, I would be Connie Storyteller Kwan. So what is that middle name that you would give yourself? You can ask your friends, maybe they will know. What is it that is so special about you? And you want to bring that into the interview so that you can be remembered for that. The next question is, who am I? What are my values and what are my capabilities? I need to be able to back that up with stories that demonstrate these values and capabilities of mine, that make it slightly more memorable than the next person. Then I want to ask myself, what kinds of environment will I thrive in? As much as the interview is the employer trying to find out whether you can do a good job for them, it's also an opportunity for you to find out whether this is a good place for you to work and a good place for you to be successful. Because if you're not successful, then your employer won't be successful. So being very clear about what environment you will thrive in is a very important question to ask yourself ahead of time. And then finally, how does working at this particular company fit into your wider life narrative? remember the question I posed at the very beginning? The one that the VP of Product is going to ask you, which is, why are you here at this company? What is so compelling about this place? Question 5 gets at that question at a deeper level, how it fits into your goal in life and what you're trying to do, because then you will build a story that is more compelling and truthful about why you are looking at working at this place. And it has to be deeper than, this is a great company to work for. It has to make an additional level of connection with your personal life story. So take these questions and ponder them before you take that interview. Now, here's an example of my answers for these questions in a story form. I am Connie Storyteller Kwan, and I activate people through storytelling. So what I do is I teach people about storytelling, and I work with CEOs on activating their team and making their team go through storytelling. You can trust that I can do this work because I have done storytelling in a product leadership capacity for the last 16 years at large public companies as well as small fast startups. I am naturally organized. Something you might not know from reading my resume is that I organize my closet in the colors of the rainbow. So I like to be organized, and this is a capability that I bring to everything that I do. I am also extremely competitive when it comes to solving hard problems. I like to challenge myself. I study computer engineering, but what you might not know is that I chose that because it was the most competitive degree to get into. I like a good challenge, and I bring that spirit to my work. And finally, I thrive in an environment where there's high trust and hands-off management that gives candor feedback. As you can see, in my answers, I've taken care to create memorable story points that allows people to remember a characteristic that I share. So for example, I told you that I'm naturally organized, but rather than leaving it there, I tell you a little story about how I organize my clothes so that it will be memorable to you that I am an organized person. Similarly, as you answer these questions, you want to look at what personal anecdotes, what small story can you tell to help cement this particular characteristic that you're going to share in the interview setting. I have no doubt that you will be able to successfully answer these 5 questions and be prepared for the interview that you're about to head into. What's more challenging than writing the content of these answers is actually your delivery of your stories. That's because over 70% of the communication between two people is in the nonverbals. So your body language, your voice, your intonation, the way you tell the story is going to be paramount to the story having impact with your interviewer. So I'm going to share now with you my storytelling system that helps you understand your storyteller type so that you can better leverage that in your interview. There are 6 storyteller types spread across an emotional spectrum. And these 6 storyteller types are evangelist, sage, wise neighbor on the more emotional side of the spectrum, and visionary, truth teller, and professor on the more logical side of the spectrum. You are dominantly one of these, and secondarily one of these as well. And this storyteller type tells you the default that you tend to be when you tell a story. And your listener is also going to be a storyteller type. And depending on whether your storyteller type matches, you will come across more or less compelling in your storytelling. As you can imagine, if you share a storyteller type, then you're likely to be more compelling when you tell your stories, just because your default is also their default. But if your storyteller type is different than your interviewers, then it's going to take a bit of work for you to bend your delivery in order to make it more compelling for your listener. So rather than explain each one, I prefer to do a demonstration. So allow me then to demonstrate how I do storytelling for each of these storyteller types. I'll start first with evangelist, sage, and wise neighbor. Starting with evangelist. Hi, I'm Connie Kwan, and I am a storyteller. You see, in my work as a product manager, I work with all these different stakeholders, from salespeople to design to marketing to engineering to operations, executive team, you name it. And at the core of what I do is work with each of these groups to get them on board with the product vision that we have. So I use storytelling to do this. And that's why I see my role in product as a storyteller. I bring people on board through powerful stories that help them resonate with our product vision. Now, I'm going to demonstrate how I might do the storytelling as a sage. Imagine this. You have sales trying to sell your product. You have engineering trying to build your product. And it's as if they're seeing a different part of this animal that you call a product. What I do is help each stakeholder in the company connect the dots on what the vision of the product is going to be. I step into their shoes and understand from their point of view how they see the product. And from that standpoint, I bring them through storytelling into a place where they can agree on what our future path and the future vision of our product is. And that's what I do as a product leader. I tell stories to rally people and bring them in on the product vision. Now I'm going to tell this again as a wise neighbor. Okay, this probably happened to you just yesterday, right? You've got salespeople coming in saying one thing, and then engineering coming saying something completely different. Marketing, meanwhile, is on a different wavelength again, and you need somebody to tie all the pieces together. That's what I do. I am a product storyteller. I take stakeholders, I understand, I empathize with where they are, and then I bring them all together so that they can have a mutual understanding of where we're headed as a company. Because until we can get on the same page, we can't move forward together. So that's how I see my work. I'm a storyteller and I'm a product leader. Now, you might notice that you were attracted to one or two or different storyteller types that I use in order to connect with you. So now's a good time to figure out which storyteller type you are. Chances are the one that resonated with you is one that is also your dominant or secondary storyteller type. So go ahead and go to this website where you can take a 5-question quiz and figure out which storyteller type you are. Now, while you go do that, I'm going to demonstrate the next 3 storyteller types, which are the visionary, the truth sayer, and the professor, so that you can see the contrast in how these storyteller types approach their storytelling. Let's start with visionary. The way I see it is, as a product leader, I'm also a storyteller. Because what I do is work with different stakeholders, be it sales, marketing, executive team, engineering, design, operations. Everyone comes in with a different perspective of what the product vision needs to be. I, as a product leader, work with each of these groups. I understand what they need, and then I build a product vision that takes into account the market needs alongside their perspective of what that product looks like. And by crafting a story around the product vision that resonates with all my stakeholders, I'm able to rally the team and build a company that heads towards the same direction together. That's why I believe that as much as I'm a product leader, I am also a storyteller. Now I'm going to demonstrate how I would deliver my story as a truth teller. Look, my job is super easy. All I do is make a plan, then everybody falls in line and the thing gets shipped. That's it. Your job's like that too, right? No? Not exactly? Yeah, I'm totally kidding, because nobody's job is like that, right? That's what they say in the job description. Make the plans, manage the delivery of those plans, but everything gets in the way. Like last week, wrestling with legal. Next week, I'm wrestling with sales. I already put it on the calendar, right? Like that's just life. I'm wrestling with everybody in the company, but to me, that's part of the job, and that's part of what's actually exciting is understanding, because everybody is right in their own way. They see a different part of the puzzle. And my job is really coming in and understanding, okay, what do you see? What do I see? What do you see? And what do I see? And tying all those pieces together in a story that binds all of us and makes the product vision compelling and relevant to every single person involved. So that's what I do as a product leader. I tell stories and I bring people together. That's it. Finally, I'm going to do this in the style of the professor. Did you know that 60% of teams fail to deliver on their goals? It's probably not that surprising to you, given that you do work in teams as well. But my job as a product leader is to improve those odds. You see, I tell stories that resonate with all the different stakeholders. I bring them in, I help them understand, and I understand where they're coming from so that we can work together to improve those odds and build a team that would move forward together and 100% ship on the deadline so that we can be aligned on the vision, so that we can empathize with each other, because at the end of the day, that's what's important, right? The team moving forward together. That's how we're going to ship product. And that's what I'm focused on, is telling those stories so that we can move forward. You might be asking, what's the magic? How do I take these storyteller types and vary them or lean into my primary type so that I can be more effective? Well, let me talk a little bit, and this is just a sliver of a much larger body of work, but give you a flavor, a taste of the different types and what's powerful about each of these types, okay? So let's start with evangelist. Evangelist is very in your face, right? High emotion, very dramatic. You see, I get right into the camera when I was the evangelist, and I try to connect with you, right? On an emotional level, I try to connect with you. I repeat words, like I said, storyteller multiple times. I try to get you to remember certain highlight moments when I'm the evangelist. And I have very high energy. I try to be as high energy as I can, and of course, in front of the camera, I can only be so energetic, I can get closer. But if you're in person, this evangelist is extremely powerful because they really, really connect with you on the energy level. When I was the sage, I leaned back a little bit. Now, some people will find the evangelist really overbearing, and they might prefer more of a sage. The sage is also very emotional, very evocative. I focused on painting the picture of the situation of the people in the room, and I describe the people in the room, and I try to get you to go on a visual journey with me as a sage so that you can sit next to me and watch this movie unfold and feel these feelings that I feel, and know that I also empathize with you in terms of being able to work with different stakeholders and people disagreeing at work and how frustrating that can be. And I am with you on this journey. So as a storyteller, I can work with you to alleviate some of these challenges, right? My energy is really focused. I'm creating more of a fireside chat type of environment here with the sage, whereas the evangelist is a very different kind of energy. And then when I transitioned to wise neighbor, I was more casual, right? Like I was friendly, I was relatable, I had sort of medium energy, medium to high. I used my hands. I try to connect with you on a one-on-one level. Like we're just going for a walk, we're just running into each other in the street here, and we're sharing a cookie, sharing a coffee, right? It's very friendly, very easygoing, which can be very compelling for a lot of folks, but also could be off-putting if it is a more formal type of environment. So again, you got to choose your audience and choose your type well so that you can relate in the most compelling way. And then when I transitioned to visionary, I became very confident, because that is the hallmark of the visionary. Very confident. I paint the future of where we're headed. 60% of the teams do not reach their goals. I hit on some of the high points that are important to emphasize. I, of course, take deliberate pauses in order to emphasize certain points that I have. And I have energy. I do bring energy so that you can be with me on this journey. But I am very directed in my energy, and I focus on painting this future that we will have together. This future of me being in your team and how I'm going to help your team align through powerful storytelling. And when I transition to truth teller, you notice that again, I take on more of a wise neighbor type of feel from a posture standpoint, more casual, a little self-deprecating, very honest, trying to get a laugh. It's a very down-to-earth type of storyteller type. So it is a very rare type, this truth teller. But depending on the situation, this person can be extremely effective. I would say for interview setting, the truth teller is rare to use, just because you don't know the situation on the other side. You don't know the dynamics of the person that's interviewing you or of the company. It can be hard to get humor right when you don't know the audience. So if you happen to have truth teller as your dominant, you might want to lean on a different one that you also feel comfortable in just for the interview. But know that truth teller is extremely powerful when you're able to use it on an everyday setting with people you're familiar with. You can really hit home with a good humor, good joke that just cuts through the sacred cow and help you kind of discuss the real problem at hand. But it's a very, very honest type of storyteller type. And then finally, we have the professor, who is much more formal, but also very interested. Their energy is interested, right? They're very interested in the people they work with. They're very factual though, and they can be very detailed. And most importantly, also very brief. They go straight into it, and then they're out of it. Teams, 60% fail. This is what I bring to the table. Now I'm going to step back and let you evaluate the facts and come to your own conclusion. That is a hallmark of a professor. Let's recap what we've learned today. Today, we learned that storytellers are powerful because they know how to connect the dots and they know how to connect with people. So if you can use storytelling in your interview, you will stand out as a candidate. There are 6 different storyteller types, and hopefully today you found out which one you are. So then you can lean into that strength that you have as a storyteller and help you land that dream job that you desire. I hope you have learned a lot today about how to use stories with your potential employer. So now go forth and tell your story. And I hope you can connect with me through LinkedIn or email me directly. My website is productmaestro.com. And if you haven't yet, do take the storyteller quiz. And I love to find out which storyteller type you are.
I see there are no questions right now.
Hey, Connie. Hi. Great insights. Thank you for the session. So we'll just wait for a minute or two for somebody to ask a question in the Q&A. Meanwhile, I'll share my screen.
Sounds good.
So audience, please go ahead and ask your question in the Zoom Q&A window or on the LinkedIn thread. Let's make the best of Connie's time here.
How can you identify? Oh, VJ, thank you. Glad
Oh,
it was
yes.
helpful.
So we have questions coming in, Connie. Would you like to take them in the Q&A window?
Yeah, I see that.
Right. So the
VJ
first
said,
question is from Tarun.
Okay.
Okay. How
Can
can
you
I
hear me?
develop the art of storytelling where I'm more introvert, brief, and cannot generally modulate my voice?
Oh, I see. I see some questions in Q&A and in chat. All right. How can I develop the art story when I'm more introvert and cannot generally modulate my voice? Yeah, I recommend practicing, Tarun. You have a range that's in you that you just haven't let it come out yet. So I'm sure if you ask your friends and they observed you, that you are very animated sometimes, depending on what you're doing. And sometimes you're more introvert, quiet. So you have a range, and the trick here is to practice so that you can access that range. And that's something I do with my students a lot. Is in the class we help them. I actually bring an actor in, and we practice the acting exercises and the voice exercises and the body language exercises so that people can build that range and actually discover the range that they have. And when you're doing it virtually, especially nowadays where everybody is interacting virtually, understanding the use of your space is important. Setting up your space, obviously, but also like you can lean into the camera and be more engaging, or you can lean back and just be a little less in their face. And these spatial differences are different in virtual versus in person. So I think practicing some of that is helpful too. Okay, Jaswinder, should we try to understand what kind of storyteller type would resonate more with the interviewer, the person we're talking with before starting our narrative? Yes, absolutely. Do that. One of the things we talked about is it really depends on who's listening, right? And the storyteller type that they are is very important to understand. So if you can guess at what that is, then it helps you tune your message to match their needs. And then you come across much more effective. You may have noticed that you're attracted to some of the storyteller types that I used versus the others, right? You're a little bit more attracted to them. And that may be because you're also naturally that type. Yeah. And again, that's something we go into. You learn your primary type, you learn your secondary type. There's an assessment for, it's like a different quiz that you use to guess your audience's type when I work with my students.
Beautifully answered that question, Connie. So we'll take this next question from Sumit. How to bring an interview? Yeah, please go ahead. Yes.
How to bring an interviewer to storytelling mode in a scenario, which is quite common in India, where it is more of a question answer way of interviewing. Question answer way of interviewing. I don't think I quite get your question, Sumit. Maybe you can resubmit it below and we'll get to it again. Just clarify what you mean by the last part.
Okay, let's take this next question from Jairaj. How can you identify what kind of listener the interviewer is?
Yeah, in my class, I actually have a survey that students use to help them guess what the listeners, what kind of listener, what the listener's storyteller type is. I'll give you a little preview here, which is you observe some of the characteristics, like whether they lean in, whether they lean out when they speak with you. You observe the word choices that they make, and you observe their energy. So there are all these dimensions that you observe, and then you put it into the survey essentially. And then it tells you, okay, this is likely the storyteller type that they are. And then of course you match it up, and then you figure out, oh, okay, they're different than me, so I need to kind of lean into theirs a little bit more, or they're same as me, great, so I can just show up pretty natural and just build up my strength and my current type. All right, let's go to Jaswinder. Oh, the document and the recording. I think that's the question for the organizer. So,
no, Jaswinder actually has a question in continuation to the first question, but how do we determine what style would work best for the given situation?
So typically there are two situations. There's the one-on-one situation where you can tune yourself more to the listener. And then there's the one-to-many situation, right? Where maybe there's a panel of interviewers. So you need to then, it's a little bit harder, that one. So you need to be able to provide something for each person. And you need to observe, okay, which style are they? So you're trying to do a lot at the same time, which is pretty challenging. So in that second scenario, the option is, one, you can lean into your own style more. So you just bring that out more. And that's probably the easier approach. And so you practice your own style. If you're like a wise neighbor, you practice making that really good, the way you tell stories as a wise neighbor. If you're more advanced, then you go into the, hey, I understand that I have a professor in the room, I have a visionary in the room, and I have a sage in the room, and I'm a visionary. So then I'm going to do my visionary thing, right? There's already a visionary, but also put in elements for the sage and elements for the professor. So then I kept everybody covered. And that's going to be harder to do. And you get better at it by practice over time and understanding the structure. But if you can't do that yet, then you just lean into, like I would lean into the visionary that I'm already naturally.
We have so many questions lined up for you, Connie. So the next question is from Kostab actually, and he asks us, how should we positively reach out to potential employer with whom already first round of basic interaction already completed, considering the fact that there are no face-to-face discussion or interviews happening at this time?
Okay, no face-to-face discussion or interviews. Oh, just virtual, you mean? Yeah, great. Yeah, you should absolutely reach out. You know, I would think back on what you guys discussed, right? Because that's your shared history, that's your shared story, and just highlight a few bullet points. You know, maybe they got excited about something you said. They're like, oh, I worked in this industry, and they're like, oh yeah, tell me more about that. So then you can highlight that again in your email. You send an email afterwards, right? Most people do that. It's like, thank you for spending time with me. I'm really excited about the company, but you can stand out by adding a couple extra bullet points, right? Like, hey, we discussed this. I thought we have some synergy there. If you have more questions, you can ask me. What you said, right? What the interviewer said that resonated with you. Raise that again. So then it gives them a little bit more story to remember you with. And then the next time you come in, right, then they would be more excited because it felt like you really thought about the relationship and your conversation and stuff like that. Yeah.
So the next question is quite interesting, Connie. This is from Bharat. He asks us, do we need to change storytelling type per context? How to determine the type of storytelling to be used? And is it possible for individual to practice multiple storytelling types and switch?
Yes, that is absolutely what we do. Is we practice multiple storytelling types, my students and I, and we record ourselves doing it, and then we switch back and forth so that we can get the range that I talked about earlier. So yes, you do use a different storytelling type per context. If you're in a room full of professors, you're not going to walk in with a sage pitch. You're just not. It's not going to work. If you're in a room full of evangelists, then again, you would try and adapt to that storytelling type as much as you can. And that's not just in the style you present, but also very much in what you're saying, the content itself, and how you structure that content as well. So if you have the range of being able to use these different types, you'll come across much more effective, especially when you have specialized audience like that. And yes, it's absolutely a learned skill. You would notice, like, if you have some leaders that you particularly admire, you can observe what they're doing and like, why are they so compelling? Why are they so influential? You can observe like, hey, they know how to vary the way they talk, the way they present, the way they interact with people, depending on what that other person needs. And it's still very authentic to who they are, right? I think that's the hard line to navigate, is staying authentic, because you don't want to be like, oh, I'm pretending to be somebody else. And that's not what this is about. It's not about pretending to be somebody else. It's about accessing the range of authenticity that you have. Like I am sometimes, when I play with my daughter, I'm a different person as when I'm at work, right? And I have this range. So why not use some from this side when I need it in the right context over here? And it's still authentic to who I am. And that's what we're working on, is tapping into that full authentic range that you have.
Sure. So the next question is from Vijay. Any tips on how you can adjust your story in real time, especially on the level of detail and depth to go on into, based on the dynamic time constraints and the cues that you gauge from audience interview?
Adjusting your story in real time can be challenging unless you know your story really well. I would take the elevator pitch. So I have an article on elevator pitch that I'm putting out shortly, and a new module I'm adding on elevator pitch. The reason I bring up elevator pitch is elevator pitches can be 2 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 10 minutes. There's a huge dynamic time range there, depending on if you caught somebody at a handshake or if you're in line for coffee, right? So very different type of pitch scenario. And also their attention is very different. So that's elevator pitch is probably, in the interview setting, you have dedicated time with the other person. So in some ways that's easier. Whereas elevator pitch, like, oh, you just don't know how much time they're giving you. So you have to adapt then, which means you have to be really good. You have to know everything you could possibly say. And we use a worksheet to lay out everything you could possibly say about your product or your pitch. And then you practice the different lengths. So you like cherry pick different things to say depending on the length that you're gonna be given. And then when you're in the moment, you already have all that in your head. So in the moment, you're just assessing, okay, which one am I using, right? Do I have 2 seconds here, or do I have 2 minutes here? What's the situation? So you have to basically assess that and then go to that pitch, because you don't want to over pitch. You don't want to be chasing after them when they've got their coffee and they're walking out. Like that's just a bad look, right? So you want to ask permission for the time, and then you want to be able to give them the right length of pitch so that they're like, oh, that's interesting. You know, VJ, I think you're interesting. I want to follow up. That's when you want to get to. You don't want to get to where they're like, oh, that's too much info. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Not everybody you pitch is going to be excited about it. And that's just part of the experience, right? So it's really controlling how much you give out depending on the situation. Hope that's helpful.
So we have this question from Jyoti, and actually another question from an anonymous attendee, but it all revolves around the language and the communication. So she says, I'm very poor at communication. How to improve from the interview point of view? And also, what are the best practices for fluent English speaking? Do you have any suggestions for that, Connie?
What are the best practices for fluent English speaking? Let's see. There are a lot of English classes you can take. There are accent adjustment classes you can also take. I think most people can understand a range of accents, but it is harder for their brain to process an accent they're not familiar with. Like I have a lot of trouble with Irish accents, right? To listen to that, right? So it'll be slower for them to pick up an accent in English that is different from their own. Like if you talk to someone with the same accent, perfect, right? But someone with a different accent, then you probably want to slow down a little bit and also give them a chance to pick it up, right? You can ask them in the moment, like, am I speaking too quickly? So that, or too slowly, right? So that they can give you some feedback on the adjustment. It's again, you're adapting to what the listener needs, right? So, you know, if you don't want to change or practice different accents, then you can just simply ask those questions. Or you can also take classes to tune your accents, and that'll give you, again, a little bit more range. It's all about range, right? So you have just more tools to access. I find myself, when I speak to people with different accents like Asians or Europeans, I actually adjust my accent a little bit, like not even deliberately, but I would hear the way they say the word and I would end up echoing the same way they say that word. And it's a way to connect with that person, like without, you know, it's subconscious. So I'm not trying to mock them or anything. It's just, it makes it a little easier for them to understand what I'm saying, actually. If I use a similar kind of intonation and a similar kind of way of saying certain words, sometimes it connects us a little bit more. So I think that's helpful to kind of pay attention to.
Absolutely.
I did have someone on the chat window asking where that quiz is. So I'll drop the link again here in case you're trying to figure out what your storyteller type is right now. Great. Let's see. Any tips on VJ? Yeah, we answered that one. Where are we at?
I think we covered most of the questions, Connie.
Okay. Jyoti's asking, I'm very poor communication, how to improve from the interview point of view. Communication, you probably, specifically interview point of view. I would, if you want to start from the point of interviews, you can. Communication is a general skill, obviously, so you want to improve that overall. So taking classes helps. If you want to just hone in on the interview piece, look up, Google like interview best practices. You can at least get the etiquette of it right? So kind of the how you show up at the interview, the thank you note that you send afterwards, what is the right format for that? So you can at least get those technical pieces right. And then from there, you build on that, right? So you can find samples of how you would do a thank you, samples of, you know, how you would introduce yourself in a meeting, samples of, you know, how you would say goodbye at the end, right? Like things like that you can access very easily, I think. And then once you have confidence doing those pieces, then you build on your overall communication as well. It takes time. It takes time and practice, but you'll get there.
I'm just browsing through if we have any more questions. Meanwhile, the audience, please go ahead and take the quiz. It's going to be of great use. Okay, there's this another question from Sumit that we haven't taken. In some of product leaders, managers interviews, the interview is usually very close-ended. Very specific questions are asked. Any suggestion to bring that mode to a storytelling mode where I can put my story and it does not look vague or verbose?
The interview is very close-ended where specific questions are asked. And bring that. Okay. Yes. Very good question, Sumit. Yeah, the interview is very close-ended. I think you want to understand the intention of your audience, actually. You don't want to necessarily go into storytelling mode without their interest or consent. Sometimes if I'm asking a specific question, I want them to answer me specifically. And that's one of the skills I look for when I interview and hire product managers. So you want to be clear and succinct if they're asking a specific thing, right? If they're like, what are the metrics you would use to measure the success of this product? Then go into boom, boom, boom. Like I would measure A, I would measure B, and then I would measure MRR, right? And then, and I can elaborate on that. You can say, I can elaborate on that if you would like. And then let them say, okay, yes, please elaborate on that. And then you have the permission, right? To elaborate, to tell the story about, okay, well, I got to MRR because of this. So just be very careful. I've been in interviews where the interviewee really wanted to listen to himself or herself talk. And that is not an ideal situation. You don't want to be in that, you don't want to come across that way. So just be very careful. But you absolutely can. You can always say, you know, this is the answer you're looking for. And there is a reason we got to this. There's a story behind this that I'm happy to share if you're interested.
Great. Thank you so much for the insights, Connie. So, but in view of the time constraints, we will have to end the Q&A here. Thanks for the participation, audience. And for any further questions, you can connect with Connie over LinkedIn or other mediums. Connie, we would like you to pick a winner for today's contest, where I declare that, the winner will be able to win a free digital course from the Institute site. So please help us pick a winner.
Oh, yikes. Put me on the spot here. Let's see. Oh, it's a tough one.
There's one more last question added by Vijay. But Vijay, please connect with Connie offline, and you can, clarify all your doubts there.
Yeah, any tips on adjusting? I think I like Vijay's question on any tips, the previous question, how to adjust your story in real time. So
great. Vijay, you're the winner for today's contest, and we will get in touch with you by end of the day or tomorrow.
Awesome.
We've enjoyed having you with us, Connie. It's been a complete pleasure. Please accept the certificate of appreciation from the Institute. So if you scan the QR code on the certificate, we will take you to the dedicated Hall of Fame page we have created for you, where you can see the recording as well of the session. So please share it among your network, and we'll be sharing the webinar on our YouTube channel as well.